Okay, we'll be joining everyone shortly. Just a few little technical things that we'll be sorting out, but in 30 seconds to a minute or so, we'll be going live. So everyone get ready. Hello everyone and welcome to Sky Betting and Gaming's Virtual Career Spotlight. I'm sure most of you will already be aware, but for anyone who isn't, we're one of the UK's leading betting and online gaming businesses based out of Yorkshire, with offices in Leeds and Sheffield, as well as one in Solihull. Our teams design, build and maintain products such as Sky Bet, Sky Vegas, Sky Poker, Sky Bingo and free-to-play games like Super 6, as well as many others. Our Virtual Career Spotlight series focuses on different teams from across the business. It's your opportunity to hear from our experts. Some initial housekeeping before I introduce today's speakers. We want this to be an interactive session, so we encourage you to ask questions. Towards the end of the session, I'll try and read out as many of these as I can. And to ask a question, you'll have to be signed into your YouTube account and then simply add your question to the comments section. This session will be recorded, so you'll be able to watch it back at a later date or share it with your friends or colleagues. Today's spotlight is on our data science team. I'm joined by Seb Gorin, Ed Berry and Stephen Wilkinson. To introduce you all to everyone who's speaking, or who's listening rather, it's probably best to start with what you do. Seb, I'll let you get the ball rolling to introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks Alec. Hiya, I'm Seb Gorin, a senior data scientist. I've been at Sky Betting and Gaming for the last 5 years. I joined Sky Betting and Gaming after doing my dissertation project while studying at Lancaster University in data science. What attracted me to apply for a role at Sky Betting and Gaming was, well, in the 3 months of doing my placement, I really enjoyed the atmosphere of the business, what was going on around me. I thought it was a great opportunity to apply my skills I've learned from university and the vast amount of data we've got here. I'd really enjoyed the culture of the business and just thought it'd be really, really good to have a great opportunity to develop my career here. I'll now pass you over to Ed for them to introduce themselves.
Hi there, yeah, so I'm Ed, a senior data scientist, also in the data science team. I guess in terms of the sort of stuff I do, you know, I primarily sort of work on safer gambling within the business, and I've been working with SBG now for sort of around 3 years. Initially, I used to be based at the Institute for Data Analytics at the University of Leeds, collaborating with Sky Bet on sort of data science, machine learning for safer gambling, and I then sort of moved across to SBG after that. Before that, I'd also done my PhD at Leeds, which I guess is where I first got interested in sort of statistics and data. I think for me, the thing that really I guess brought me across to Sky Bet was that through that 6-month project working with Sky Bet, you know, it was clear to me the sort of commitment to safer gambling within the business and the people, you know, the number of people that were really thinking deep about this, and you know, the number of people dedicated to it as a problem. And I think that really attracted me in terms of moving over, because I could continue that work and continue working with some of those people to really develop how we protect customers.
Yeah,
I'll hand over to Stephen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I'm Stephen. I'm one of the other data scientists in the team. So I've been at Skybet just over 2 years. So I followed a sort of similar path to Seb, in that we both came off the same course at Lancaster University. So I was fresh out of uni. This is my first real job, some would say. But yeah, pretty much right from the get-go, even on the internship that I did for my dissertation, from the first week, I was trusted as a data scientist. I was given the sort of freedom within the company to work on what I thought was best. The different projects that sort of come into the team, it's always new and fresh, and you're always looking at a different data set every week almost. So yeah, straight out of uni and not been kicked out yet.
Okay, you must be doing all right. I've got to say as well, as a talent delivery partner joining in this call, been working very closely with Seb recently in placing a further data scientist into the team. But before I did that, data science for me was always one of those, almost a buzzword, not taken away from any of the work that you do, but it's something that I'd heard a lot of and didn't necessarily really understand masses about. So in terms of the kind of things that we discussed today, I think probably best for anyone who's watching who has got some level of an interest in the industry but isn't doing it already, to explain what is data science, what is it in SBG, and what are the objectives of the team set.
Yeah, sure. So data science here at Sky Betting and Gaming is applying statistical and machine learning techniques at scale with full automation to the vast amount of data we have on a daily basis. What we want to do is we want to leverage commercial value and operational efficiencies. The goal of the team is to extract meaningful insights, the data source we have. We assist with Sky Betting and Gaming in making the right decisions. Some of the areas of work that we've done previously can range from analysis, modeling, automation, and data creation, and some consultancy type work. We work in part of a data tribe, but work very closely with the business intelligence group here, which consists of analytics and research as well. I'm not sure if Ed or Stephen's got anything to add on to that.
Yeah, I think that that covers it pretty well in terms of that mixture of machine learning, modeling type work, but also that importance of analysis and insight in doing data science, and also curating data points for people as well, because sometimes some intelligently curated data is often all you need for a problem. You don't always have to build a fancy model.
Okay, and what, I suppose, in terms of working with all those different areas, what are the main objectives? Ed, you mentioned say for gambling, for example, would be the area of focus for yourself. Seb, is it quite diverse, the spread of things that you've been working on?
Yeah, for sure. So I've worked on quite a diverse number of major projects since being here in the last 5 years. It's been really good. Some for different areas of a business, using sort of like different modelling techniques as well. Yeah. Okay.
And for you, Stephen, I suppose, can you paint the picture a little bit in terms of where data science sits within the wider business? Who do you work closely with?
Yeah, so as a sort of wider data science team, so obviously on this call are 3 data scientists, but within the wider team, we also have sort of within team engineers, data engineers. Some will probably call machine learning engineers. So we're sort of 2 halves to one team working together. So whereas data scientists, we handle the sort of modeling side and statistics, they handle the sort of production facing stuff of getting data in and out of the models, getting it to the people around the business who consume what we output as a team. Sort of thinking of it as like a factory process, so like building cars or something. As data scientists, we build the engine, but the engine's no good if it's not got wheels attached to it and it's not got the bodywork and the petrol in it. Similarly, as if I build a model and it only works on my laptop, it's no good to anyone else without it being able to be accessed by other people. So yeah, I think looking around, going to different conferences and stuff, and being in the data science community, so wider than just SPG, there's been quite a few different approaches of setting up data science teams. I think the way we've set it up with both data scientists and data engineers working together has worked quite well for us. You see some companies where data scientists have to do their own sort of engineering, or they have to do from building the model to putting the model in production and then handling it afterwards, or you see data scientists being completely separate from data engineers, where they just sort of do the model and then throw it over the fence to another department almost and hope that it gets put in production at some point. I think that's really the way we set it up has really benefited the sort of speed of delivery for us. And so that when we're working with other areas of the business, sort of on this consultancy basis, where we can turn around and say, okay, this is going to take so long, but I can build a model, pass it off to the engineers, and immediately start consulting with the next area that needs some work. So that speed through the business, it is really beneficial to making valuable changes. And with the areas that we work with, mostly we look at sort of CRM side, so interacting a lot with how we interact with customers and how we target customers. It's probably a main focus, but then we don't want to limit ourselves, so we often talk to other areas of the business to see where could we add value that maybe we didn't think we could before. So something like handling with the customer contact center, we're at the moment thinking about how can we make the way we talk to customers more intelligent, not just from emails and push messages and things like that side, but actually when they ring up, how can we help in that situation? And then some of the more traditional stuff, something around fraud, around SG, those type of areas.
This is it's fascinating, and I suppose the next question I'm going to ask you kind of follows on from that in regard to methodologies, but again in a simplistic term, prior to discussing the methodologies or the different methodologies you'll use, is a lot of it test and learn, and a lot of things where you're almost dipping your toes into the water to see if something would work, and then if it does, you do more with it, or is there significantly more to it than that?
Yeah, so as data scientists, we're involved right from the get-go directly with stakeholders, so they come to us with oftentimes very vague questions, and you sort of sit and talk them through what's available to them, how we could push it in one direction, how we're looking in that technology, how are they going to use this data, what does a successful project look like to them, ideally how would they want some sort of data, doesn't matter what it is, how do they want it delivered to them, and what would it tell them is the key part for me. And then it's taking that sort of high level question, going to the sort of data science toolbox of, okay, I've got this many models that I can use in the platform that we use, and say, okay, this could apply to it in this way. If we use this different type, we can get some extra information out that another model doesn't give us. And so trying to avoid that trap of getting caught where you only want to use one type of model. I think everyone in the data science community is probably guilty of it at some point, is that you find the latest and greatest model, some like AI deep learning thing that sounds really cool and fancy, and you want to apply it to everything. But that's not always what's required, not always what's best for the people that ultimately have to use it. As Ed mentioned before, sometimes it's just a single data point that a short SQL script will do, rather than like a big 6-month project on a neural network or something like that. But yeah, we try to sort of mix it up and keep reevaluating and bouncing ideas around the team to say, what sort of different models are available to us, what could we use in different situations, what applies best.
Can you run us through some of those different methodologies you would use and sort of why perhaps you would use them as well?
Yeah, so a recent project we did in the data science team was around customer churning. So obviously that's trying to predict which customers are about to leave the business or stop betting with us. So hopefully we could sort of intervene earlier to try and keep them on board for a bit longer. So two ways of looking at this. I think previously we'd looked at it as more of a classical sort of binary classification of yes, this person's going to leave, or no, this person isn't. But what we decided to do this time, or what we tried, was more survival regression. So this is sort of time to event modelling, common in sort of medical fields, predicting like time of death or something like that. So pretty steep on the medical field, but obviously applying that over to a customer leaving the business, it almost matches up with that. So we're in the sort of classification side. You sort of have to sort of fix a time period in which they leave, and you just get a 0 to 1 score. They give you sort of probability of how likely you think they are to leave, versus in the survival regression, rather than having that fixed window of will they leave in this window, you're almost sort of plotting a curve of how likely they are to leave on any given day in the future. So what that gives you instead is a sort of, we think a customer is going to churn in X amount of days, rather than they've got a probability of leaving in X amount of days, which sort of changes from being fixed by this time window to we can have different strategies for people who might leave in the next month, who might leave in the next 6 months, who might leave in the next year, which gives you all that extra information out of it.
And do you have to constantly then assess how accurate the model has been then, so to see whether or not, so you put a model in place and then 6 months later, yeah, it's almost perfectly true, it's 90% accurate. How do you deem success?
Yeah, so there's a number of sort of standard ways that come with most of the models now of how to assess accuracy. I mean, once we put them out live, obviously we will keep monitoring with the team that's using them to say, okay, is this working? Usually starts with an A/B test, just versus the old way of doing it. How does the new model work? But yeah, even before it's reached that stage, we'll do some sort of like in and out sample testing where we already know the answers and we sort of mark it against stuff that we already know before putting it into live. But yeah, it's a constant process of looking at how it's performing against the sort of actual effects, and then thinking, okay, can we tweak it a little bit to make it a little bit better, or is it up to standard?
Of course, and I suppose that being one great example, churn is relevant, I think, in almost any industry, but especially our own. Safer gambling, one which is directly applicable to the betting and gaming industry. Ed, can you tell us a little bit more about perhaps any of the projects you're working on?
Yeah. So I think that's it's something to make really clear with this, that obviously like most data science teams, we do that sort of work with marketing type teams around modeling and helping that sort of support their strategies and things. But there's a key thing as well, that we have to make sure that this is always done in a way that's safe, that ultimately we aren't marketing to customers who might be at risk, that customers are remaining protected. And that's where some of the safer gambling stuff becomes really important, so that then our marketing teams, when they're thinking about sending emails, actually we have risk models that mean that they're filtering out chunks of customers based on these people might be at risk. So actually we're not going to send them any emails, we're not going to give them that sort of personalized marketing, because we're concerned about that there might be a risk there. So that's something that we've been working on for quite a long time, that core work around models to identify risk. And it's kind of an interesting problem from a sort of data science perspective, because we don't have a sort of neatly labeled up set of at-risk customers. It's not the case that we can just sort of go, right, well, here's all the at-risk customers, here's all the ones that aren't at risk, and treat that as a kind of reasonably straightforward data science problem. The reality is problem gambling or disordered gambling is a multifaceted thing, and it can express itself in a number of ways. So we have to sort of look at a range of kind of indicators that we think might reflect somebody experiencing harm, but it's not as easy to just be like, well, here are the customers that we know are experiencing harm. Often even people themselves might, there might be an issue with their own awareness of problems they might be having. So that's what sort of makes it, I guess, an interesting problem to work on. And those sorts of indicators, yes, it can be things like people choosing to exclude themselves from gambling, let's say, which is an option that all operators will offer. It could also be collecting actual survey data that again gives an indication of people's gambling and potentially risk behaviours. It might be thinking as well about topics like affordability, so actually trying to quantify unaffordable gambling and then do something off the back of that, which again, is another complex topic that requires a lot of thought and a lot of discussion. So ultimately, there's a lot of things that kind of sit under that heading of safer gambling, because even I guess outside of the data science team, we have a really excellent research team who do loads of work with our customers that then feeds into some of the campaigns we've done around trying to educate customers, trying to raise awareness. So it's not all just about identifying people. There's also that kind of, I guess, educational arm to it as well, about actually making sure people are aware of some of the tools that are available to help with gambling and to manage gambling and all these sorts of things. So it's really a sort of big project that crosses a number of teams in the business, but I think it's always something that data science have been really sort of heavily represented in and contribute to, is how we tackle this sort of problem.
I suppose it's an ever evolving project as well, isn't it? It's something which rightfully is never going to go away, and for us to be at the cutting edge of it, is that where data science really has an impact, so to make sure that we're doing things even better perhaps than our competitors.
Yeah, I think that's key. That we're doing everything we can from a sort of machine learning perspective, but also more broadly everything we can just from a sort of data type perspective. So we sort of talked at the start about some of the work we do around data curation, and that's something that's really helped support our internal risk teams, is actually us providing the data points that they need in order to be able to identify customers that they might want to review in order to help inform those interactions. And this is interactions in the terms of actually people ringing up customers, talking to them on the phone, potentially placing restrictions on the accounts. And by using some of the sort of big data technologies that we have available to us within data, we can do that in a much more timely manner, in a way that fits into the business operation.
Brilliant. Cheers, Ed. And the next question for you, Seb, we may have covered it slightly previously, but if you could elaborate on any points, that'd be great. So clearly we work on a variety of different projects, but do different areas of the business have different requirements, would you say?
Yeah, fully, for sure, yeah. So as Ian's pointed, we could develop a few data points to help customers of us in the business, or we could develop machine models for goals. We don't really know sort of what business problem we're trying to solve next. So I think, as Stephen mentioned, a stakeholder in the business might come up with this sort of like idea, but not really understand what they want. So then we'll take this idea and research it within the team, understand where we want to go with it, and then we'll get out data science toolbox and see what kind of like modeling fits best, whether it can be sort of like regression, classification, clustering, survival analysis, what sort of like different type of techniques can we use to solve this problem. And there's sort of like a range of different stakeholders throughout the business with these different problems, from gaming, bet, risk, free to play, CRM, which we've built up great relationships over the years and help support their problems.
Okay, brilliant.
I think just to add to that.
Sorry, go on.
Obviously, working with different people around the business, some we work with more than others, but it's important to understand the sort of statistical literacy of some of these different areas, which is part of the challenge of the job, is to take these sometimes quite complex sort of methodologies and translate that into something that everyone can understand, and especially trust that what you're producing is correct. Because obviously you see a lot of models that are like very black box and you can't explain them. So just like numbers in one side, numbers out the other side. When people have never dealt with it before, it can often be quite difficult to get them on board. But that's sort of part of the fun of the job, is to take something that is quite complex and then explain it out and show how all the individual bits are working together to give that sort of like final score for someone.
Yeah, again, fascinating really. And thinking of the day-to-day and how you go about doing your jobs then, are there specific technologies that we're using right now, Ed, and how do we evolve our data science platforms moving forward?
Yeah. So I think in terms of current technology, and I think like a lot of places, we're making heavy use of things like Hadoop. So we have a sort of on premises Hadoop cluster, and we use various big data tools within that sort of ecosystem. So things like Impala and PySpark that help us do this sort of data machine learning work at scale. And I guess in terms of the sorts of modeling and data curation we currently do, it's principally sort of things running overnight. So overnight we might have something run that's looking at, say, a customer's activity back from the previous day, and there's a lot of value in that in terms of often a day is the most sensible sort of chunk of time to look at. But I think something we're really excited about as a team and within data is the ways that we're looking to sort of evolve our data platform and really take how we work to the next level. So if we look forward to the next couple of years, some of the work we're doing around sort of exploring new options for our data platform, I think will really sort of revolutionize the way that we do data science, in terms of we'll have I guess broader access to a really wide range of kind of best-in-class technologies, as well as things like the tooling that we might need to do modeling over different time periods. So, whereas currently not everything, but a lot of stuff is kind of, looking at a day or, looking back yesterday, actually, can we start looking at problems and looking at behaviors within a day, and I think there's a lot of potential in that. It's certainly something that for me, as from a safer gambling perspective, is really exciting about thinking about what you could do in closer to real time for customers.
I tell you what's fascinating there, Ed, because prior to this call, we've been having a discussion around, and you mentioned there again, the potential of data science, but how do you navigate the hype to deliver value for the business beyond all the hype that's out there at the moment?
Yeah, so this is a kind of interesting one. I think anyone who's spent time thinking, reading about data science will have sort of encountered a lot of this hype. And I was sort of reading something recently that I think sums it up very well from Francois Chalet, who's the author of Keras, which is a very popular deep learning tool, who kind of says that we should probably be skeptical really of the sort of short-term hype around AI, but that we shouldn't lose sight of the sort of long-term vision, because the reality is, AI data science has already been transformative in a number of areas. If we look at computer vision, we look at, Google Translate, these sorts of things, absolutely amazing strides have been made, and there will be many more things that will be transformed. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, every sort of fancy claim you see out there around AI and data science transforming the world is going to come true. And certainly not to the timescales that sometimes get claimed. I think a lot of things will take longer maybe than people think. So I think what's key for us is that against this sort of backdrop, we just kind of cut through and continuously deliver value for the business. Because ultimately, AI has been through cycles of boom and bust in the past. Back in the 80s, there's an idea called expert systems that was very popular and got a lot of traction in the business world. But ultimately, all kind of there was a bit of a bust there because people weren't seeing the value that was kind of promised, and a lot of money was getting spent, and then there was a bit of a sort of lull in interest and funding. So, this is definitely something we've got to be sort of thinking about, is that we don't fall into that trap of, riding the wave of the hype and promising too much. So I guess to get a bit more concrete in terms of what that actually looks like, this is something that James Waterhouse, our head of data and sort of founder of the data science team, has talked about recently, about the way that he tried to build out the team was he try and sort of build things out kind of horizontally, whereby you embed data science in as many parts of the business as possible, so that instead of really focusing on trying to build a couple of really amazing models using the fanciest techniques that all your mates will be impressed by, you instead think about actually how can we deliver value early and often for people? How can we continuously do that? And as we've already said, sometimes that's just an SQL query, sometimes it is a model, sometimes it's just some intelligently curated data working closely with analytics teams, and that's always kind of been our way of working, is that it's about what can we do to get that value, and what can we do to keep delivering value, rather than chasing, the fanciest techniques available. It's important to be aware of them. It's important to know what's out there, but we shouldn't always be jumping to them, because ultimately, we put ourselves at risk of creating a little bubble within an organization, and then suddenly, what's the actual value that's getting delivered?
I suppose bubbles can burst, can't they, as well? And is it being clever with your resource then? Is it just actually thinking we've got this amount of time, we've got these amount of projects, we can't throw everything at everything, so we'll be clever about what we're doing?
Yeah, I think it's about being clever, and it's about understanding. It's about having an understanding of what's good enough for a problem and what people actually want. And I think that's to me one of the key skills of data science is actually, somebody comes to you with a problem that may seem really complex and that might require some really complicated technique to solve, but can that problem be reframed in a simpler way that actually gives them what they want? Or is somebody might think that they want a model, but actually do they want a model, or could they actually achieve the same result with a few data points in the right place? And that's where having data engineers and having a good relationship with data engineers is so essential, because you only have that option in your repertoire if you've got people within your team who can get that data in the right place for people who have those skills in data engineering to actually get data where it needs to be. So yeah, I think it's essential.
Of course. And you mentioned there briefly in terms of the team that James Waterhouse has been working on as well, but looking a little bit more locally. I mentioned earlier in the call that recently we've placed someone into the team who will be starting shortly. But Seb, do you want to touch any further up on potential future growth?
Yeah, for sure. So previously, say 6 months to a year ago, we've had 4 data scientists in the team. We've had 3 engineers and a product owner. This gets the data scientists doing testing work and stuff like that as well, and a bit of engineering resource as engineers. But more recently, we've expanded. So we've got an extra data scientist coming into the team from trading. Got 5 extra engineers coming on board as well. Engineering manager, 2 dedicated test resource, extra assistance from our product owner, and more official support architect and a principal engineer and a dedicated ADL. So this is going to give the data scientists more time to focus on data science work and less testing requirements. And it's also going to give the teams more advantage to be able to ingest and export new data sources here and there, which is going to be really, really valuable going forwards for the data science team. It's going to open more doors for us going forwards, and some really more exciting projects and key enablers for the team. Okay,
brilliant. And obviously we've done a lot of talk about the day-to-day, but outside of that, and I suppose working around what you've been doing and trying to get the best out of yourself, have any of you, I think Seb, actually you mentioned, have you been working on an MBA? Have you started that yet?
I've not started it yet. The induction is this weekend. Yeah, so I'm really, really looking forward to doing an MBA in advanced management and leadership. It's part of an apprenticeship scheme here at Sky Betting and Gaming. I think it's going to be really, really good and a massive opportunity for my career progression and drive things forward for myself. I think it really complements my master's degree in data science also, and it's just really, really good showing that Sky Betting and Gaming spend the time and resource delivering these courses to people in the business. I think it's really, really good, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Now, we have had a few questions coming in, which we'll get onto in just one moment. Some of them we may have already answered. But one last thing that I wanted to really touch upon is, from a recruitment standpoint here, really, but how does someone become a data scientist? I know that there is, in a sense of you've mentioned degrees already, but can you perhaps just discuss a couple of different areas that people could come from and how they can, if they're not yet a data scientist, how they can get into it?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk on this one. I mean, I think one thing to say about data science is it's certainly, very kind of accommodating. I think of a wide range of backgrounds, and that's certainly the case for us. We're not a team that sort of obsess, I guess, over particular, academic credentials or whatever. You know, we've all within the team had different routes in. You know, for me it was the work I was doing during PhD that got me into it. For others, it could be a master's, or it could be sort of experience gained in an existing role. So I think for me, if somebody was kind of thinking, right, how do I get into data science from perhaps another role, I think I'd probably advise, you know, if they're currently working somewhere, to actually try to think about ways you might be able to do data science within your current role. So, you know, let's suppose if you're doing some work in Excel, you know, could you potentially do that same work with R or Python instead, and make that potentially, you know, make it a more efficient piece of work. I guess it's also worth saying as well that, you know, data science is certainly quite a sort of broad area, but I think it's not kind of the only game in town when it comes to, you know, interesting work with data. And whilst, you know, a lot of, again, as we've kind of hinted at, a lot of the hype might be around the data science as a title, you know, there are other roles, you know. So if somebody, for example, is interested in the side of data science around, you know, doing data work at scale, building pipelines, automation, you know, building data products, this sort of stuff, well, actually then data engineering is something that they may also be interested in. And equally, you know, if somebody actually is really attracted to the, you know, things they might read around, say, visualization, statistical analysis, then actually, you know, analytics, business insight type roles are also another thing that people might want to look into, because ultimately, you know, we have data scientists at SBG, but there's a lot of people outside of data science that are working with data and doing really interesting stuff with data. So I think, you know, it's always worth considering there's a lot of different ways that you can end up working with data and kind of, you know, doing fun and exciting stuff with data. Yeah.
And if you're struggling to get access to that within your existing job, is there a lot of online resources you can go away and can you seek things out yourself and do I suppose your own learning to put yourself in a better position when you do go for some of these roles?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, there's tons of sort of online platforms. I think there's a lot of sort of freely available resources out there as well. You know, a lot of good books around things like R and Python and whatever that to learn those sorts of things. You know, a lot of the key, I guess, machine learning textbooks are freely available online as well. The authors have made them freely available. So and I think that's the thing that's, you know, good about data science is there's a big sort of online community, and generally there's a lot of stuff that you can access without having to spend any money, which is great. So you can, you know, find out if you like it before you spend any money.
So I imagine it won't be for everyone. I'm sure there's loads of people that will love it, but other people not necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got to say, for me, like well, Seb, we discussed probably about a month ago now, I came in not really having any idea what you do as a team. I think I've got a bit of a better idea now, but it just seems like there is so much available, so much that you could be doing, that just the world's your oyster really for anyone who's right at the start of that journey. Stephen, from your perspective, I suppose you've got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think if you're looking to get into data science, I think it's important that you start with something that you're personally interested in. There are a lot of what you normally see in the sort of guides online and stuff is like pre-made data sets that are all like very nice and very clean, and they follow through very logical steps, but that just doesn't translate to the real world where everything's very messy and there's something wrong with every single data set you'll ever come across. But it's important that you have an interest in what you're actually looking at, and that sort of helps drive that sort of learning. And obviously, if you have sort of familiarity or an interest in it, you'll know what you want to look for and what you want to get out of it in the end. I think if you just look at, you know, a table of data, is anyone really interested in that? Not particularly. If that's so, it might be. I mean, for us in the betting industry, you might start off with something like trying to predict football matches, something like that is something probably everyone's tried. But that's obviously personally interesting to me because I work in the betting industry. But if it was just, you know, any other data set online, probably not going to be as interesting to try and learn skills in it.
So are you trying to say there, Stephen, sorry, that you can't yet predict the result of a football game to 100% accuracy? I was hoping that following this that we could perhaps discuss the weekend's fixtures. I probably wouldn't be sat here if I could. I love that. Okay, brilliant. So we have had a few questions come through, and some of them have already been Some of them have already been answered, but I'll just work through them now. I can't multitask, by the way, so I'll just have to read and then come back to you. So the first one, we have touched on this multiple times, and I'm trying to think, well, any of you could answer this freely, but someone has asked what our tribe, what the tribes that we mentioned. The simplest way of answering that, I suppose, is saying teams. But Ed, perhaps, do you want to sort of touch upon that further in terms of what a tribe is at Sky Betting Gaming?
Yeah. So it's something I'd never heard of before when I moved across to Sky Bet. I think it comes from Spotify initially is the idea, but essentially I see a tribe as being a department essentially, and maybe that's not quite the way it's meant to be interpreted, but in my head it's essentially a department. So within data, right, we've got data as an organization, and then within that there's various teams or squads. So we have data science, we've got teams responsible for our data platform, for doing the architecture work. We have delivery teams of data engineers for different sort of products, and then equally there'll be other tribes like say the Bet tribe, who's responsible for the Sky Bet product, in terms of, and that will include analysts. It will include the people actually responsible for the site and keeping all that up. And equally, we have, say, like the gaming tribe that handles the gaming products. There's core as well, which is the kind of core, well, it's the core stuff in the business in terms of, things like logins on site and accounts, and various kind of internal things as well. So that's the kind of idea. I think if you just think of it as a department, I think you can't go that far wrong, personally.
Yeah, I've got to say, so I came from a business where there was around 50 employees. And I think the reason for it is because there's just so many of us, really. So many people working across so many different areas, and it is quite, once you're within the business, it does make a lot of sense. But hopefully externally that has cleared it up a little bit. So a question here, I think we may have answered this, but again, if anyone wants to add anything further, maybe not. But what is a typical day as a data scientist at Sky Betting Gaming? So we discussed generally the projects you work on, but if you were to look at your calendar for tomorrow, let's say, is it quite varied? Do you work on one project at a time? Happy for anyone to answer that, really.
Yeah, a typical day, it'll be, for myself personally, it'll be with the team to see how everyone's doing, discuss the projects we've got going on the board, any releases we make here or there. Then sort of like, can be going out meeting stakeholders to see what problems is going on. Catch up with people about various things we're working on, spend a few hours developing, working on projects. Every day can be different, to be honest, when you look into your diary. Yeah, it's interesting because every day can be different as well.
Okay, great. Couple more questions. So we have had one saying what you'd expect from a new data scientist, which I suppose we've answered, but as a follow-up question, very, very specific here. So try and give it the best answer you can. For someone who has no commercial data science experience, would you value experience gained through analysing commercially related Kaggle data sets, for example? Yeah, go on, Seb, you're nodding.
Yeah, for sure. On the previous question of how people to get into data science, which was answered by Ed and Stephen, I was thinking of Kaggle. So there's a lot of great competitions on Kaggle. And if you can sort of like build up a great profile and get into the competitions and do really well, I'd recommend also saving them on a GitHub repository as well. So it can be something you can add onto a CV and forward to an employers. Also with Stephen's comment, working on sort of like projects that interest you as well, make sure they're in GitHub as well, because it's really, really good holding your resource there of the variety of different projects you've been working on.
Okay, I've got my own question there. Kaggle. Just for anyone else who's watching who doesn't even know what Kaggle is, I'm one of them. What's Kaggle?
Kaggle's a website for data scientists community. So you can enter competitions. Santander might have a competition to answer a specific question about data science. And if you get the best accuracy of a model and do the best project, you could either be given a financial reward or potentially offered a job at the end of it. Wow. There's a lot of different resources on there as well for different data science projects.
Okay, so very much potentially a starting point in a way to earn a bit of cash and get a job as well. So good starting point.
Yeah. I think something as well that I'd sort of recommend as well is kind of coming back to Stephen's point around, a lot of data is quite messy, is as well trying to sort of, start with a messy data set and kind of build something end to end with it. So, whether that's, I don't know, say you get some data from the ONS, right, and it's in some interestingly formatted Excel file, and then you actually take that and you clean it up and you do something with it, and that sort of workflow, because again, that's it helps you develop those skills, kind of thinking about data and dealing with the realities of sort of messy data. But I mean, for me personally, I didn't have any industry experience before. I'd done a PhD, and then I did a data science internship at Leeds Uni, and that was the first sort of commercial experience I got, and then moved over to Sky Bet after that. I think the thing is it's that reality of what real data is like versus versus anything else. I mean, a potential thing as well is is there even some data that you can collect yourself that you might find interesting to analyze? Can you do you have some wearable tech or something that you'd be interested in analyzing the data from, or is there some show that you're interested in that you could get some tweets about or something like that, and work out how to get all that yourself and do some analysis on it? I think those sorts of projects are fun. They probably give you a feel for whether you're interested and whether it's the sort of stuff that you want to be doing. But yeah.
And would it be useful to discuss any of that perhaps it's an interview? So if you're going for an entry that is entry level as you can get within data science, if you've done some of this off your own back, would that be something, let's say if you were an interview panel right now, would you be interested to hear about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think we're always looking to hear about things people have done where they've been applying data science techniques that they're sort of excited to tell us about, and that they want to have a detailed conversation about, because that's typically what we're interested in. We want to hear about the nuts and bolts of how something got done, how it all worked, because that's really useful for understanding a candidate, and whether they'd fit in the team, I guess, is getting really into the nitty gritty of how something was done and their thoughts about it, because that's such a big part of data science, is that creativity, of that ability to think creatively about problems that you're trying to solve with data, and being able to see that from somebody is always really good.
Okay, brilliant. So the last question is very specific. And this goes back, I think, Stephen, you were talking about churn modelling earlier. So is the churn model that you're talking about, not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, a Bayesian hierarchical modelling to predict churn? Is that what it is?
No.
No. Very easy answer. I mean, can you elaborate further on what it is or not?
Unfortunately, I didn't build it.
So the algorithm it uses is called it's accelerated failure time survival regression. I guess on the sort of Bayesian hierarchical point, that's certainly a way you could tackle it, and I think would be an interesting way to tackle it. I kind of did a bit with sort of Bayesian hierarchical models back in my PhD and have a certain soft spot for them, shall we say, and I've done a little bit work internally. I realise that's a slightly weird thing to say, that you have a soft spot for a particular statistical technique, but that's why I'm in data science, I guess. But yeah, I think there's certainly scope for those sorts of techniques. I think the thing, or the challenge of kind of Bayesian modelling at the sort of scale we're dealing with, is that potentially training a model on millions of customers could start to get quite computationally expensive. And I know a lot of progress is being made around sort of optimization in that space, but there's potential that your model might take quite a while to run, at which point or quite a while to train, at which point it's not that useful, but certainly something we can think about.
There we go. I think that was a fairly thorough answer. I'm glad that someone was aware of it. It meant literally nothing to me when I was asking a question. So thanks very much, Ed and Stephen. And look, that I believe. Well, actually, we've got one more question. Here we go. How do you productionize an ML, a machine learning model?
So I guess on that point, we have an internally developed tool that helps us sort of put models in production. So it's sort of Ruby-based tool that provides that kind of configuration and I guess orchestration around a model in production. And that's kind of the way that we currently do it. So that's supported by our engineers as well. So that might just be taking you know, an SQL script that pulls out the data for a model and running that with the appropriate config to then feed it into some Python that runs a PySpark model, and then some more SQL to put the data where it needs to be and all that sort of stuff. So that's the kind of, I guess, the flavor of how models actually get, how we do that kind of, I guess, ML ops, as we might call it.
Brilliant. That is it. So any more that come in, I'm afraid you're too late. So yeah, I personally thought it was a great session. I've definitely learned more about data science listening, and I think it gives some insight in terms of how we go about doing things at Sky Betting and Gaming. But for anyone who's watching and knows of anyone else who would be interested in the industry, I think we've also touched on how to get into it as well. So yeah, thanks very much, Stephen, Ed, and Seb, and for everyone who's answered, or rather asked questions as well. Thank you very much. See you later, everyone.